Good. Okay, so welcome to this, this final session of what for some of us has been quite a long day. So I'm going to start it off with a Dharma reading, I think entirely appropriate to the subject matter. I'm going to take some verses from the Bodhicharya Avatara, which kind of sum up the spirit in which we're doing what we're doing, the Bodhisattva spirit. So if you just want to make yourselves comfortable and listen to this, and we can reflect on the purpose and what's motivating us to act, to do what we're doing. And it's actually the transference of merits or parts thereof from a puja, but that's again, at the end of the day, for us in the UK, that's entirely appropriate. With the good acquired by doing all this, may I allay the suffering of every living being. May I be the medicine for the sick. May I be both their doctor and their nurse until the sickness does not recur. May I avert the pain of hunger and thirst with showers of food and drink. May I become both food and drink in the eons of famine. May I be the protector of the unprotected and the caravan leader for travelers. May I be the boat, the causeway, and the bridge for those who long to reach the further shore. May I be a light for those in need of light. May I be a bed for those in need of rest. May I be a servant for those in need of service, for all embodied beings. Just as the earth and other elements are serviceable in many ways to the immeasurable beings dwelling throughout space, so may I be sustenance of many kinds for the realm of beings throughout space until all have attained release. Yes, so welcome again. So my name is Akasha Raja, and I'm speaking to you from the west of England. And Tejapala will want to unmute himself. He can introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Tejapala. I'm in Melbourne, in Australia. It's nice to see people here. It's particularly nice to be with people from the USA. Most of what I do with the Earth Sangha so far has been very, very British centric, and it's just nice that the time zone to shift and get a different thing.
Okay. So I think we could probably dispense with this because we basically know where, Angela, you kind of know where everyone's from for when it comes to allocating groups.
I'm even wondering, Akasha Raja, whether we should just stick with stay everybody with one session.
We could just do that, couldn't we?
Yeah. Break up groups.
Sure. That's one less thing for Angela to do. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so we'll all stay together and have a multi-regional group. Okay, so this session it's about the Earth Sangha itself. So one of the functions and purposes of this conference is in a way to launch the Triratna Earth Sangha, which I think over the course of time will become something like Triratna's environmental wing. I'm starting to think long term, and I feel I have certain ideas brewing about what the Earth Sangha is, that I think the movement needs an environmental wing, an international environmental wing. So what we're going to do this evening is introduce the Earth Sangha to you. And that's what this session is about. So this whole thing came about because a number of us, a lot of us, all of us here, of course, are concerned about the climate and ecological emergency, and a bunch of us just thought it was time for us to get together and actually start organizing something and getting something formal underway, particularly with the this year's crucial COP26 talks, which start in just a few weeks' time, this is a real kind of make or break time in human history, and the most important climate talks that there have ever been and possibly ever will be. And so we all felt that there needed to be a Triratna response. There needed to be engagement from us as a faith community, as a Buddhist community with this. So that's why this came about, and that's why we're here this weekend. we can talk about the Earth Sangha. Well, I'm going to talk about it sort of from three perspectives, really. Three ways in which it is important and can have a real effect, have a real impact in our community and elsewhere. So the first of those is on the personal level, if you like. So many of us who are involved in climate activism and have felt alone. Yeah, I think many of us have probably had the experience of not really quite knowing where to turn in our Sangha, and to feel that very much that you know there are very few people that we can really feel that we can share with. So I think having a Sangha, well, a Sangha being an assembly of practicing Buddhists that we can turn to, that we can share our grief with, we can share our concerns and our fears, but we can also share our inspiration and our enthusiasm in ways that many people have been doing in all sorts of different contexts over the course of this weekend so far. So on the purely personal level, we can meet, we can share, we can support one another, we can find solace together, we can inspire and rouse one another, and we can inspire each other with best practice. So on the purely personal level, there's an important function. And then there's the level of the Sangha itself. Now, my sense is from my small corner of Triratna that actually the Triratna finds it quite difficult to talk to itself about the climate and ecological emergency. I was just leafing through my centre's Facebook feed earlier this evening, just out of interest, and I saw there were 2 entries for this conference, neither of which had any responses at all. Yeah, so there were no likes. There was just, it was as if we were just kind of shouting into space. But then there was a post about lunchtime yoga classes starting at the center, and then there was a whole bunch of likes. I mean, it's not a very representative sample or very scientific, but to me, I kind of felt that sort of expresses something that I've felt for a while, that it's not as if people are hostile or indifferent to the climate and ecological emergency. It's almost as if for various reasons, it's something that people don't want to look at. Yeah, it's a bit like a kind of the elephant in the room that everyone knows is there, but nobody really wants to address. Possibly because it's simply too big for people to take in, because they feel that they don't really want to let things into their kind of private Buddhist / therapeutic space. Whatever motivates people, I can't speak for everybody. But my sense is that we do have an issue in our movement when it comes to talking about this. And this, I think, is where the Earth Sangha can play a really important role in teaching the movement to talk to itself about climate and ecological emergency in various ways. And again, Tejapala will go into this into a little bit more with some examples of what we can do. And then the third level is our interaction with the broader climate movement and with society. Yeah, so I think we, as well as being effective in communicating these issues within our community, we can have an influence outside our community in the broader activist world and in the community at large, be it the faith community or just society in general. So I've been told I've gone slightly over time, so I will stop at that point and hand over to Tejapala.
Thanks, Akasha Raja. I have to say I don't quite have quite as a bleak. My take on it is not quite as bleak as yours in terms of the way where our Sangha is at. I get to talk to lots of people. From my job is organising religious communities of different kinds to get involved in climate action, and I think Triratna is considerably better than most faith communities I engage with. I think there's a lot of people like the people who are here who are very concerned and willing to get active. And there's a very large number who just don't know what to do, in my view, but who would like some help. And I think that others who say, well, that's good, but I'm not sure that that's anything to do with the Dharma. And I think that's quite tricky, that territory. And we need to have that discussion in some depth, because sometimes there's something in it that we need to listen to, and sometimes we need to say no. But yes, and I agree, there's also a whole lot of people who just not on their radar particularly. So those things that I just put in the chat, and that Akasha Raja was just going through, they're really some aims that a small group of us have come up with for the Triratna Earth Sangha, so the personal, the Sangha, and the societal spheres. And I'm going to talk now a little bit about what some of that might look like in practice. So funnily enough, this personal sphere is the one that we found the hardest to get exactly right. To be the clearest on, there's some ideas that we've got, but we don't quite know what the plan of action is yet that's actually practicable. So I'm going to leave that for a second, but if we can go on to the Sangha sphere, I can think of 3 areas here. One is simply having a conversation with others in the Sangha, as Akasha Raja was saying. Certainly the people who study communication about climate change say that the single biggest pattern worldwide on the climate is still not talking about it. That's the biggest problem. Having spent a little bit of time in the USA, I sort of understand why you might not want to talk about it there as well, you know, whether in case you get someone who gets really angry and says, I hate you and I hate Al Gore, and, you know, I've had that response in Massachusetts one time. And then the other 2 areas are grounding it in Dharma practice. So we've got quite a lot of resources online already. People have given Dharma talks on this. People have developed retreats on this. There's Eco Dharma in the Pyrenees. There are people. There's stuff that we've done already, and it would be good to bring it together. And I'm hoping that maybe an order member or 2 could be willing to try and work on that and bring it together into some sort of shape, and put it on the Triratna Earth Sangha website and the Buddhist Center online. And I think also whatever practices that we start, as you know, as Akasha Raja was saying, this could be the Triratna environmental wing, effectively. Whatever practices we start to encourage people to undertake, I think we need to be doing that in discussion with other order members, so that we can actually make sure that it's grounded in our system of practice. And then the third area in terms of the Sangha sphere is the Sustainable Buddhist Center Certification Scheme. There's a really good scheme that's being developed. We can just get our centers to be more sustainable. We can do what we can to talk to center chairs and committees and see if we can get our centers more sustainable. And then there's the societal sphere, and I've come up with maybe a couple of ideas here. One is teaching meditation to climate activists. There's a lot of very stressed out climate activists. I know, I'm sometimes one of them. And it would be really good to, if we can actually communicate at least meditation, if not the Dharma in its more full form. And I know there's a lot of interest in that, especially in Extinction Rebellion. I don't know how well developed XR is in the USA. I know it's very developed in the UK. And there's often, they've got what they call a regenerative aspect to it, and they're interested. People want meditation, both for their own lives, as well as meditation in protests that they get involved in. So there's work there that can easily be done, I think. And second, there's supporting actions which are done in a multi-faith or a Buddhist way. So again, Extinction Rebellion, it's possible to get involved and do some of those meditation protests that I mentioned. I'm on the worldwide organizing committee for and Green Faith International, and we're organizing a global day of action coming up on the 17th and the 18th of October. I'm sure I think some people here are holding an action in mid-October. I think that, and that's just fantastic. Yay. Yay. I've just got to ask Rhoda Shruti, where are you holding that?
That is all still in the works, and Mary Wagner is the lead on that. She's another Green Sangha member. But we'll put it in Slack when we've got it all settled. I think it's going to be in the Mission District in Dolores Park.
Great. And just because I have to do my job, if you do it, put it on the world map, please put it on the world map on the website. And that's really exciting. So far, last I checked, last night, we have somewhere around 200 of those actions that have been registered. We're 3 weeks out. We think we're going to hit somewhere around 300. And that takes different forms in different parts of the country, of the world. And I'll go into that in a bit in a second about, you know, exactly what that looks like in different parts of the world. Hopefully try and make it relevant to the people here. So those are the various ways. Oh, sorry, and I should say, when people get involved in some kind of public action like that, when they are people who would be visible, you would be publicly perceived as someone who is a person of some faith or another, we have much more impact than anyone else just taking part in an action. I know this from experience. You can have 10 people holding a meditation protest outside a bank that is refused to divest from fossil fuels. That gets more attention than 10 other people just protesting. So 10 people. So similarly, if you have a protest of 100 people, no big deal. 100 people, when they all have come from a multi-faith background, and there's a rabbi there, and there's some church ministers there, and suddenly that's interesting. The media might start paying attention. So often people ask, what can I do? I'm not sure what difference I can make. I think that the answer is, as Buddhists, we definitely can, much more than we think. And partly that's simply, I'm sorry to be a bit sort of practical about this, but when you are meditating and you're protesting, you are visible as a meditator protesting. So it stands out. One single solitary meditator, with order member or otherwise, they stand out, especially if they're holding a sign that says something about climate action. And even more visible if you're wearing one of these. So really well worth it. How are we going to get started? We're asking people around the world to become, or to consider becoming, a centre rep for the Triratna Earth Sangha. So in a second, Kasharaj is going to put a Google form in the chat where you can sign up to get involved in that. Oh no, that's a little while, sorry. The idea being, we have a centre rep in each location, perhaps with a couple of other people they're working with. And you might think, well, I don't know, I don't want to be the only person doing this. I think it's worth thinking, can I think of one other person in my Sangha who might be interested in really helping get that off the ground? 2 people is a lot easier than 1 when it comes to getting something off the ground. And then between the 2 of you, you might think, well, are there 3 or 4 or 5 others who wouldn't want to carry the can, but who might be interested in taking on a degree of responsibility, at least from time to time? And then suddenly you've got yourself a team, or at least the beginnings of a team. So yeah, that's the plan at the moment. Kasharaj, over to you.
Sure. I wanted to say, actually, I'm glad that you have a kind of more positive experience of talking to Triratna folk about climate. I guess my experience is coloured by the fact that I'm currently quite tired, and so it's quite nice to hear something altogether more hopeful and optimistic. I just wanted to throw that in. But yes, following on from the point about the centre reps, is we're going to hold a couple of meetings on Sunday, the 10th of October, and we're holding 2 meetings for time zone reasons, that we want to give as many people as possible the opportunity to join in. And that the idea of those meetings is that, well, somebody might be really inspired and keen to take up the challenge of becoming a centre rep for the Triratna Earth Sangha, or they may just be, you might be interested in wanting to scope out a little bit more what might be involved. So we're not asking people to kind of sign their lives away or to commit to anything onerous right now. We're just presenting an opportunity for people to come along and find out more about what it would mean in practice to be an Earth Sangha rep. So Tejapal has put those in the chat, I think, those times. So the first one is unlikely to be of interest to, well, it will be to some of you, but our friends in North America, it might be slightly early. But the first meeting is UK times 9:30 a.m. on October the 10th. So that in Sydney, that's 7:30 p.m., which is very civilized. But in New York, it's 4:30 in the morning. On the West Coast, it's 1:30 in the morning. But, if you're a night owl or insomniac or whatever, then that might be a thing for you. And then we'll have the same meeting again. And the meeting will be for 60 minutes. So it won't be a massive kind of massive amount of time commitment. The same meeting will then be repeated at 6 p.m. UK time, which is 10 a.m. on the Pacific time and 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the States, 4 a.m. in Sydney, not quite so great for the Australians, and 10:30 p.m. for anyone coming from India. And there's nobody here from the subcontinent, so that's not really relevant. So yeah, and there is a form, which I think, Tessie, have you shared that link, Tejapala?
I just have.
Yeah, okay, so there's a Google form that is in the chat that you can complete and basically sign up for one or other of those meetings, or both, I suppose, if you're feeling super keen. And we're interested to hear kind of where you're at in the movement, so to speak. So we're asking you to say whether you're an order member, a Mitra in training for ordination, a Mitra not in training for ordination, or a friend who's been around for 6 months in regular contact or more in regular contact with Triratna. Just so we're quite keen to have people involved who've got some sort of reasonably consistent grounding in Triratna, rather than somebody who's just walked in the door a couple of days before and is keen to get involved without really knowing what Triratna is about. So that's why we're just trying to establish, what kind of level of experience people have. And obviously, at the same time, trying to be as inclusive as possible and open the doors to as wide a spread of people within Triratna as possible. Yeah, so do please seriously consider coming to one or other of those meetings. So fill in the form, send it off, we'll get it, and we'll set up a meeting.
And as Akasha Raja, I think you said you don't have to say, "Yep, I'm going to be a centre rep." Just come along and just find out.
Yep.
And see what you think. So where to start? Well, we thought we'd give people some people something to do to get on with it as a starting point. And what we're suggesting is getting involved in the Green Faith Day of Action as a starting point. And there's a few different things happening in different parts of the world. I will focus for this meeting on mostly what's happening in the US. In briefly, I mean, Dira Charity is the only other person here from Australia, and she's heavily involved in trying to organise something here in Australia anyway. And in the UK, there's one person here from the UK. Can I just ask, Molly, whereabouts in the UK are you?
I'm in Northern Ireland, so still in the UK, just across the wee sea.
Just across a little tiny sea.
Yeah.
Called the Irish Sea. All right. I don't know what's on the map in Ireland, so I'll be putting something in the well, Akasha Raja will be putting something in the chat in a second, which is where you can see a world map of actions that have already been registered. In the US, the key messages are for two. There's what we call targets. I don't like the language. One is President Biden, and the other one is a very large finance organization called BlackRock. So if you're in New York, I think Ananta is still here. Yep. I know there will be an action for outside BlackRock offices. They're the world's biggest financial investor, and they've made some good noises about getting out of investing in coal, oil, and gas, but they haven't really done it yet. It's also an important action because BlackRock is also one of the main potential investors in the very contentious Adani coal mine here in Australia. And so there'll be people around the world who'll be very, very interested in that action. So please get involved in that one if you can. Have a look on the map, see if you can find it. Otherwise, for everybody else, my understanding is that primarily the actions will be outside. We're being asked to hold actions outside offices of US Army Corps of Engineers offices. And I don't entirely know why. That is the way that's being done. I think it's a way of getting the message through to the president. What we're looking for is actions where people are holding signs that say something like, it's all about fossil fuel pipelines in the US. President Biden, no new fossil fuel pipelines is the key message. If you can put that on a banner or a sign. And just email me. I will put it in the chat, and please, I'll get in touch with Sarah Shaw, who's in the Bay Area, and she is, I think she might be in LA. I can't remember, but she's leading the organizing of that in the US. And so I'll be able to put you directly in touch with the lead organizer, and you'll be able to either look up actions that are happening on that map, or just say, I want to hold one myself, and she will give you all the information you need about making that as effective in terms of the way it's targeted as possible. I can see a hand up, Sela Shri in New Orleans.
Sure, I was just going to say that in the US, the Army Corps of Engineers is usually the primary lead on the environmental impact studies. Anytime there's a contest of oil and gas pipelines or plastics industries or large environmental impact studies are done by them.
I see. So it makes sense that stuff to do with no new fossil fuels would be held outside their offices. Great. Thanks for that. I did wonder why they were choosing that. And I've never had a second to ask Sarah, who is flat out busy, but we'll be delighted to hear from you. In fact, I'll just put Sarah's email straight into the chat.
So there is a question from Dura Charita about that, which is asked, she's asking, does that apply to US Army bases in other countries as well?
No.
No.
So that's Sarah's email there, sarah@greenfaith.org. Or if you're not getting anything back from her, here's my work email. The reason being I said no, dear Charita, is because generally speaking, well, certainly for those of us in Australia, it's much more our energies are much better used for targeting federal members of parliament. And there's no one else here at the moment from other parts of the world where that might be relevant. So in practical terms, not really. So yeah, any questions though about that, or and certainly if you come to the Centre Reps meeting, we'll be talking in part about that and in part about getting going more generally. Any questions though, or hesitations or comments? Because we've got a few minutes to sort through those things. Does that help, Rhoda Shruti, does it help you think about what your action might be?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to recommend that the core team on that listen to this talk, but I've taken some notes so I can pass them along. Mm-hmm.
And please do contact me. Like I say, I'm in regular contact with people all in Green Faith in the USA, or just contact. Sarah is stupidly busy. She's the busiest climate activist I know, and that's a horrible thing to have to say about anyone. So if you can't get hold of her, just directly email me. I will make sure that your questions get answered.
Okay, thank you.
So perhaps we can move on to what we were going to do for the breakout groups, but we could perhaps do now together. Kasharaji, do you want to introduce that?
Sure. Okay, so we propose a couple of questions which we can just kick around together in this group. So out of the things mentioned today, what do you feel enthusiastic about? Would be one of them. So those kind of three areas, those three spheres, if you like, in terms of the Earthsanger. What's grabbed your attention, if anything, from those? And the second point was, who else might be interested in your Sangha? You know, and what do you think that they might be enthusiastic about if asked? So, you know, as Tejapala said earlier, we're trying to kind of encourage people to sort of reach out in their own sanghas and try and sort of co-opt other people who might be interested to try and get something off the ground. So where's your enthusiasm going, and who else do you think might be interested in your Sangha, and what might they be enthusiastic about if you were to ask them? So those are two questions that we could kick off, have a little conversation with.
I would just start out with most of my connection to this kind of work has been very local, and my enthusiasm is just about really connecting in a different way than I feel I have been able to do on Slack with the international aspects of this. And it adds a little bit of fire to this. You know, we might have our plans that we come up with in a meeting, but you feel it's a little insular. And so the enthusiasm for me is just being able to hear from you and getting a sense of the larger movement.
Yeah, and that's really often the case. I think when people go, wow, I'm actually part of something bigger than I realized. And there are people I can talk to who get it.
I mean, I wonder also if there's anything to be said for people who are outliers. There might be more than one on the call who doesn't have a center. And if there are ways that those people can connect in with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not necessarily going to tie up into a very, very neat structure that works for everybody. But obviously, we don't want to have a situation where people who do have enthusiasm and want to participate can't because they're not part of a centre. That wouldn't make any sense at all. So I think we should. That's a good point, Rhoda. I think that the opportunity should be there for anyone to get involved. Including outliers, as you put it. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for drawing that out.
Familiar with the shape of the US Sangha to know whether New Orleans or Maine would be considered outlying territories.
Oh, yes.
Definitely an outlier.
You better believe it.
Trouble is, everywhere is so big that even when you're, even if you are in Maine, there might be a Sangha nearby, but you could be the other side.
Yeah, I'm literally hundreds of miles from the nearest Sangha.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm pretty just trying to relate what I am doing or could do to what you're saying. I'm particularly interested in, exploring, connecting Sri Ratna members who are concerned about this issue. I've been working for a couple of years now with a small group through the Aryaloka Buddhist Center in Newmarket, New Hampshire. We put on a few retreats. We've done some of our talks are on Free Buddhist Audio. There's only 5 of us, but we try to do things probably twice a year. Lately been remote, of course. And I'll certainly tell them about this, but we've felt quite isolated, frankly. We haven't really known who's concerned about this in the way we are, even as we've been deepening our own attempts to address the realities of climate and other ecological crises. So I think the sense of tying in within the movement is going to be very helpful, particularly to someone like me who is really geographically isolated, even though I do a lot of local conservation work.
That makes a lot of sense. We'll have to give that some thought, I think, in as to how we make this work for people like Akasharaj in locations like that. It's one thing to say, here's an action, go and do it. But if you're the only order member and there's like one mitra, that's a different kettle of fish.
So I really love the idea of teaching meditation to activists. And since I left the Bay Area and moved back to my home state, I tend to work with, there are many climate activists in Louisiana that are struggling to keep up with all of the actions. And I just recall, by the time I left the Bay Area, I was exhausted, and I was dealing with anger issues around climate and peace activism, and I just knew how important it was for me to sit my way through it. And so I do think that there's an opportunity for that here. I also love the idea of collating resources, and my particular interest within Triratna as a way that we can look at our own movement and how we're affecting the world is, don't kill me, is our use of Amazon to sell our literature. So I have an interest in finding other ways to market Triratna publications outside of Amazon, which is one of the largest climate disaster organizations in the world. So that's my interest. Thank you.
That's a really interesting point, and I assume that I don't know whether Windhorse Publications has an international shipping operation. If they haven't, they certainly should have.
They do.
They do. yeah, I know they use an intermediary to deliver books within the UK. I guess that can work internationally. So it should certainly be possible to avoid the use of Amazon to ship Tree Rattler literature.
And I strongly suspect that would be quite a hard one to shift within Tree Rattler, because the counter view would be, well, but we need to get the Dharma out to as many people as possible, and that I can hear that already. And so you need to be able to, you know, have that conversation and not remove all of your hair in the process. Yeah, I mean, I would want to support those efforts if I could. I would like to, yeah, I'd love to encourage that kind of meditation outreach, particularly, gosh, I can certainly imagine in Louisiana, because you know, people who care about climate must be borderline desperate. And I can certainly imagine the need to do something about, you know, teach people how to cultivate compassion rather than horrified anxiety. Must be like a very, very present issue where you are.
So yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say that, yeah, teaching meditation to climate activists is something that really interests me, and I recently did the training with climate leaders, which is something, if you don't know how to set up, and then runs a training, which this year was online, over a few days, and then I connected in with that network and started to teach a bit of meditation. But yeah, that feels like a starting point, something that I'd like to do more of. And I just wondered, because there's so much stuff out there, if you guys have, probably putting something together is probably a bit too much to hope for given the limited resources, but there seems to be a lot of curriculum out there. So if you can point to something, I know we obviously have a lot of resources ourselves within Tree Rattler. But I was also looking at, there was also like the Eco Sattva training, which I nearly signed up to, but didn't quite.
I did the Eco Sattva training about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. And I don't know what others thought of that. It was I couldn't sit still. I was so frustrated by the way it was done. Unfortunately, it had so much of that. Maybe it's just a cultural reflex for me, but everyone in it seemed to be from a certain kind of culture on the west coast of the USA who was gushingly enthusiastic about literally everything, and it was just I couldn't handle it. So it was kind of, and it was people, to be more specific, it was people talking about exploring feelings about the climate and nothing much when it came to action. And I found that, I don't know if it's changed, but I wasn't super enthusiastic about pointing people in that direction. That might be unfair and maybe out of date.
I know it's one of those things where you feel like we could put our heads together and do something pretty amazing, and they're really, you know, they seem to be quite popular and pop up as, you know, they've got good marketing, a bit of a classic. Tree Rattler, we know we've got good stuff to offer, but we don't necessarily package ourselves very well.
But perhaps in terms of, I mean, I certainly think we should get people together who want to be Santa reps or work on this stuff. Order members who are interested in Dharma outreach to climate activists. I think we can certainly get together and talk about that as a topic and start working out what our resources are. And we've got some already. We've got Shanti Garba's book. Personally, I think David Loy's book, Eco Dharma, is excellent. So there's much that we can draw on. Not that David Loy's Tree Rattler, but wow, I'd like to have him as an honorary order member.
I'd love to be part of that conversation if it happens.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
Sign on the dotted line.
Could I ask, you know, since I'm not anywhere near a center, I don't see myself being a center rep as you describe it, but I'm quite interested in what Ananta's just been talking about, either being trained or helping within an initiative that might be a Tree Ratna oriented approach to activists, offering meditation and other important Sangha tools or Dharma tools.
Well, yeah, I do come along to one of those meetings and we'll just talk about getting started on that. I think we may need to start breaking up into some working groups at some point. But just if you're in the room to start with, I think it'll help. And I'm sure there's going to be people in the climate movement near you, so there'll be a need.
Yeah, there's a local Eco Sattva group. I think it seems to be involved in some very practical things like window inserts for heating efficiency and things like that. So it's not at all California enthusiastic.
Okay.
That's what we're in New England. We're very uptight here.
I'd like to say a couple of things. Sort of to you, Gunnar-Peter, and just to people in general. I was wondering, whether, where there are small sanghas, whether they could connect across countries and do training and talking together, and not just be limited within country, but perhaps anyway. That's just an idea. But at the moment in Melbourne, it seems to be there's things are picking up, which is really good. So I'm sort of feeling that it's going to be more possible to get more people coming together. And there's some people who are very busy and aren't able to actively take part in actions and so on, but who are happy to speak to other people and be generally supportive, which is really, really helpful. And then the other thing that I sort of had a question about was, how about do people talk about this in their chapters?
That's a really good question. We started talking about this in the Sangha chapters is a really potentially deeply frustrating, but ultimately hopefully fruitful place to talk about. I wonder what other people's experiences have been of trying to do that.
Well, my experience has been a mixed bag of some people will say, I really should get more involved in this stuff. But you detect there's like a kind of degree of, there's a degree of reticence about that. Other people will kind of, engage quite fully with the topic, but say, I just do what I do, like I lead retreats or I teach Dharma or whatever, and that's my role. And some other people kind of blanket or sort of shimmy around it. So I have a range of responses within my chapter situation. It's what I was saying earlier. I know very few people who are out who are kind of out, obviously climate skeptic or denial or hostile. I mean, there are some, but it's not like that. It's more like this. There are ranges of there's degrees of hesitancy, if you like, around the theme. So yeah, it is an interesting area in chapters.
What about others? How have others found trying to raise this in chapter meetings?
Well, I'm in a chapter with Rhoda Shruti, so we find it easy to talk about. Mostly everyone in our chapter group, I believe, is very sensitive to their personal relationship with the climate and climate awareness. However, I'm not sure that all of us are out, doing actions. There's definitely talk, there's been talk about travel or the effect of travel within Triratna, and public meditation for climate. We love hearing Rhoda Shruti talk about Green Sangha, and it makes me sad that I am there's only one other Triratna in New Orleans right now. She's part of the Seattle Sangha that lives here.
There is go ahead.
I was going to say she's working hard on the racial equity front, the anti-racism front within her Sangha. So she's kind of got her focus.
There can be a sense of preaching to the choir a little bit, because where I am, it is a bubble. And, you know, I feel like the work that would be most impactful would be for me to get out of my chapter and talk about it. And so the more visible actions that we do, even there, though, we're sitting in the middle of San Francisco. It's, you know, everybody's like, oh, look, there are some more meditators outside a bank, you know? So, yeah, the middle of the country here is, you know, could use us, our California enthusiasm. They'll kick us out.
In my chapter, it's 5 of us, and we're scattered from Maine to Vancouver. No two of us live anywhere near each other, but although we mostly just do reporting in, part of what we tried to do is talk about the cutting edge of our practice. And it occurs to me that, you know, looking at our practice broadly, for me, certainly, this whole area of concern is probably where my cutting edge is, not so much meditation per se or any particular tradition of Dharma practice, but this whole orientation that this weekend is focused on. And I think the fact that we're just really open to each other and have gotten to know each other over a number of years makes it possible to talk from that point of view, not to propose an action, because, you know, I'm not going to go to New Mexico to join one other person in my chapter, but I think it can change people possibly that way. And we're quite diverse, not in our opinion about climate and similar issues, but we're just quite diverse in our life experience and kind of where we're at. So that's a good idea. I like what you suggested.
That's quite a wide range of responses so far. It's really interesting. And yeah, I can imagine, you know, the need to get out of your particular bubble, as you put it, Rhoda Street. I was talking to someone, Fletcher Harper, who's helping to organise Green Faith in the US, and I think so. They've got 2 actions they're having early for the day of action, just to get people into, you know, to get some visibility, get some interest in the whole idea. And one of them is in Boulder, Colorado, and I was saying, how is it you're going to portray the idea that this is mainstream by doing this outside of, I don't know, Whole Food Organics in Boulder? It's not really going to communicate that. Thankfully, the other one's in Charlotte, is it in North Carolina? So that's, but yes, yeah. So, and for others, it might be like just trying to connect at all. My chapter, I'm not in one at the moment. I haven't been since COVID, but prior to that, I got some useful feedback on making sure I stayed in skillful states of mind as a climate activist, but done in a way that wasn't sympathetic to why you would be a climate activist in the first place. I just got preached at, really, about, you know, make sure you know, and people saying, well, why don't you just stop doing it? Maybe you wouldn't find life so frustrating. And which was, you know, not really getting it at all. So it's one of the reasons I'm not in a chapter anymore, unfortunately, because I didn't storm out, but I just, when COVID came along, it just seemed like, well, so yeah, experiences can be range quite a bit. And I think that's why it's quite useful to come together if we can. Like this, at least find others we can talk to. I know when Parami comes to Australia, I feel like, there's someone I can really talk to about. Yeah. So that's kind of my segue into a final plug, I guess, for coming along to that first meeting of, not the one that's at 1:30 in the morning, the other one, to come along to the first meeting of, whether we call it centre reps or interested people. So Kasha Raju, have you got that link?
Was that the Google form?
Yeah.
So you want me to post it again?
Just one more.
You know, I just thought of something else that might not, I mean, you can tell me if you think it's relevant, but isn't half the order is in India, roughly, from what I've heard, and India is heavily impacted by heat and drought and, you know, other things. So I wonder, you know, how involved, and I have also heard that the Indian order is more activism inclined. I wonder if there is a
incredibly important. 5 years ago, I gave a talk at the Order Convention in the UK about this issue, and that year there was something like 30 order members from India present. It was a record at the time, and I was very excited by that, and yet I went and spoke to Subhuti afterwards to try and talk about, well, you know, where I might start, where anyone might start, and it's tricky to say the least. They've got, yes, they're heavily impacted by the climate. Yes, they're more generally favourable to a more activist way of looking at the world, and yet the kind of at least at that stage, the conceptual understanding of the climate issue wasn't as great as it was in the West, even though people knew from direct experience what they were up against, and also seeing how what anyone might do was not as well developed at that stage. So it's and also I think the kind of activism that's being done in India, often there's been kind of, it's really been about building up a world within a world, and quite strenuously avoiding the sorts of, you know, getting involved in parliamentary politics or anything like that. So I think it would be very interesting to have that conversation. I would love to know where to start.
I just wanted to pitch in there because one of the projects I'm involved in at the moment is setting up Karanar in the USA, and Karanar has part of their strategy climate change mitigation as one of the sort of pieces underlying. So it's not in every project, but I know, for example, recently they've undertaken, well, their first project in years in Bangladesh, which is exactly that, like a climate change mitigation. I can't recall any of the details actually to hand, but you know, so there are organisations like that, Tree Rattler organisations, who are getting on top of it, which doesn't really address the point about it being in our movement, but yeah.
Thanks for pointing that out. I had no idea Karanar was doing that. It's really exciting.
So we had an address. We had Amrit Siddhi, an Indian Dharmachari, talked. I don't know how many of you were there. It was probably some ungodly hour, but he talked a lot about you know, in very optimistic terms, on very positive terms in some ways, about a lot of the policies that the state was enacting in India, which I thought was interesting. But basically, what I heard from what he said was an appeal for, you know, that we need help, and there was a lot of it was about education. It's like, it doesn't sound as if there's you know, a lot of the order members in India are of a certain age and come of a certain disposition and come from certain backgrounds where it simply isn't something that's ever really entered into their. It's never really crossed. They've never crossed paths with it. So I got the sense from Amrit Siddhi that they would like people to, well, you know, I guess come and help, and come and sort of, you know, go around centres and actually talk to people about these issues. And then I started thinking, yeah, but then you've got to fly and all of that stuff, and that kind of, and somebody else talked about travel earlier, and that got me thinking that I don't think it's helpful for us to sort of rule out any possibility of international travel. I think there's a cost-benefit analysis that needs to be done, but in some ways, you know, getting together in large numbers, you know, there's a definite benefit there that we need to take seriously, rather than a sort of knee-jerk response that we will never travel long distances. So that's an aside, but I think that's an important point as well.
It's an important aside, and I'm really aware of making those trade-offs. I've flown to central Queensland, which is a long way from where I am. It's like saying flying from LA to Chicago or something, that kind of a distance, and to go and get arrested at the Adani coal mine site. And the Adani coal mine, if it's built, there'd be a rail corridor going in, which would allow 8 other coal mines to be built, and the total amount of CO2 from that will be 40 billion tonnes. So I figured it was worth my flight to try and do my bit.
Sure. But I mean, there's the maths of the climate emergency, but there's also the whole principle of how much more we can achieve as a Sangha when we are, you know, as it were, physically together. So there's all of that as well.
More as we come out of COVID. I'm just aware of we're at the hour. and I really appreciate being able to talk, especially in quite a small way, a small group like this. I'm assuming this is the last session, unless there's one more after this.
Oh God, no. This is definitely the last session.
But there's not one right now, is what I'm checking in on.
Sorry?
Is there one right now? Because do we need to get out? So
No. This is it. It's 11 p.m. in the UK now. No.
Oh, I see. So you've got another one your morning.
Yes, we can go to sleep now.
Okay. All right. I just don't get that because it's 8 in the morning. But okay, good.
I know. But yeah. Well,
Okay, great.
Many thanks for coming. It's been great to see you and hang out with you, and we hope we've got some kind of got you enthused a bit about the Earth Sangha, and hoping to find out more and spread the word in where you are.
Okay, thank you. See you tomorrow, but not at the 2 a.m. meditation.
Okay.
Thank you. This is exciting.
Good. Yeah, it is. It really is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your efforts.